He's playing like a man possessed. And, Rassie also took it one step further this week.
And so much to talk about. It's not this rugby union show. Welcome back.
Oh, and there really is so much to talk about. After that Saturday's play, we saw some incredible results elsewhere. Of course, our big focus is going to be on the Springboks and that match, much anticipated match. I think we started this show overall, Sim, talking about France versus South Africa at the end of the year, and that being a marker to the respective teams' strengths. Do you still feel that way after what we saw last night? I mean, I know the French will probably lean in on the fact that they haven't really played together in a while, but your take?
Yeah, in terms of markers, it definitely was. So obviously, one down, one to go, the other being Ireland.
Yeah.
If the French are sitting somewhere and going, yeah, you know what, we were underdone, undercooked, or however you want to, ring rusty, however you want to put it. My answer would be, why would you sit plotting revenge for 2 years and then not be ready? Like, they
Right.
had a much better opportunity to be ready for this than we were. Also, the weekend before, we played Japan and they didn't play. So presumably they were, working on being together. But again, it just shows sometimes a level of sort of experience and maybe insights, from the Boks side, to recognize that they needed the Japan game to be ready. And then,
Is that Julian I'm hearing in the background?
yeah, no, like crackling away.
Yeah,
Thanks, Jules.
yeah. There's only one person. He types like he is. He types like he is attacking a typewriter. I've never known. I mean, okay, I've hung out with a couple of you journo types, and I've heard that sort of sound before. But Julian does it with a furious anger.
Yes, there's a French vengeance to it, if you know what I mean.
I know. No, but I absolutely agree with you. I think for all of the planning, all of the talk about in the build-up to this match from at least from France, and look, I think some of the things that were quoted were a little spurious, was maybe a little bit clickbaity to try and build things up. But they did have an opportunity to arrange a hit out, whether it's a second-tier team, whether it's an opportunity to give, put some minutes into those legs and maybe just get those combinations working. One combination for them. Oh, and sorry, by the way, if you're wondering why I haven't mentioned the score, it's because Paul didn't watch the game. We're getting old, so, 10 p.m. kickoff is a rather late thing. But if you missed it, for some reason, it finished 32-17, 4 tries to 2, and it didn't start off that way because Toma Ramos and Damien Penot had this incredible connection right up front. I think it was still 3 minutes 50 something on the board when the French went over, and it looked ominous. It looked like, there was a lot of space there. They found it fairly easily, and it was a wonderful try and a great way to kick off the test match, I thought.
Yeah, no, well, great if you're French, and if you're South African. If you're South African, you're kind of sitting in two places there. You're going, oh no, just the start. We didn't need them to have with all the talk of vengeance, revenge during the week. You kind of like don't need them to get on top of the Boks. But here's the weird thing. I mean, I remember making the mental note, but not actually expecting to, for it to come true this time around, was that, geez, it's exactly like the 2023 quarterfinal, the way it started.
Right.
Because if you go and look at
Right.
the time, of Cyril Baye's try, the opening try of the quarterfinal, it's exactly around the same time.
It was about 3 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, it was quite interesting to then watch the whole game sort of unfold in pretty much the same way. I was stunned. I was incredibly stunned by actually it's happened again, and that's exactly what the French. That's the headache the French will probably wake up with this morning, going, "Oh, don't tell me it happened again." And yeah, it did. And I mean, as performances go, I mean, you talk about Tomás Ramos and Damien Peña. I mean, the one thing that struck me is Curtly Arendse, one of the most alert players on a rugby field. He
There's
just
no way.
seemed completely in football. They talk about being oblivious to the danger when you're a defender. He had no idea. Damien Peña must be about 1.9 meters tall and clearly over 100 kilos, like at least 105 to 110. And somehow Curtly, didn't see him, reacted late to
Yeah,
him running
yeah,
through
he missed
the
it.
ball. I got kicked. I'm like, dude, what is going on with you? That was the first part. And the second one was just, obviously that was a kick pass from Ramos, and the second one it was that pass as well. Again, where the French, this is when the French approach was working because they chose such a big pack, such big guys, everywhere. I mean, I looked at that loose trio. I think the lightest of the lot of them was probably about 110 kilos, which is
Yeah,
like you've got Sia on our side who's probably just a little bit taller than me, and I'm 6 foot, and then is probably 100, with a couple of weights in his pockets. He's not a huge guy, but because they were doing that, they were going quite direct, and what it was doing obviously was it was bunching, it was narrowing our defense, and then it's one thing to do that, and then quite another to then exploit it, and that pass, that sort of right hand pass from Ramos to Peno, to make it happen
yeah,
once the defense was narrow, was incredible. Like we talk about how Manili Boks, sort of when he passes the ball to you, you can almost read your name in it. It's like, okay, that one's for me, not anybody else. It was pretty much one
yeah,
of those passes. So it was a sensational start by them, but pretty much like this, like 2023. All the Bucks did was they counterpunched whenever they got an opportunity, and I think the possession stakes were what, or about a third or something insane. They only had like a third, and they were camped in their own half pretty much the whole time, but they kept getting points whenever they could. And with Sasha's two penalties, and obviously Kobus Reinach's brilliantly taken poacher's try, classic Kobus
wow,
Reinach try.
yeah,
But yeah, and we kept sort of we
yeah,
stayed in the fight, made that, and then when the moment came, I think that the only time the Boks were in the ascendancy in that whole test was the last quarter. When that moment came, they scored three
mm.
tries, and suddenly, the team that was going along slowly, suddenly has got bonus points try, if you want to call it that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it was an absolutely fascinating way in which it played out because it felt like, and like you say, what I kept thinking was the Box did more with less. They just didn't have the field position. They didn't have the possession for most of that first half. And then, of course, we have to talk about the red card. But I must just say, I thought Angus Gardner ran a pretty good match. The one thing that perhaps I could criticize him for
He
was
talks one too, eh?
was that
He talks one. He talks a good match too. Never saw.
he
I've
talks a
never
good.
seen a referee talk a good match. It's
I
almost
was
like
about to
commentary. It's just
say.
running the whole
I was
time. I'm
about
like,
to
dude,
say
dude,
that's
dude.
my criticism is that there's a lot of talk, and as a result, I think that it led to the players having a lot to say as well during that match. I thought that the French pack in particular were full of chatter throughout the 80 minutes, and that can cause you problems when it comes to discipline because now you've got a back and forth happening at every scrum, and it did take a while for them to get set for most of the scrums, particularly in the second half, and I thought that he lost the match there for me. But in terms of whether or not he was harsh or not, and then the red card will obviously come into it, into the conversation. Is worth talking about. Before I forget, guys, do send your messages, your comments. I don't know how to read that. Is that Nobulele Siboto? Nobulele Siboto? I'm
Yes,
assuming
that's
you're
it.
South
No,
African.
yeah,
Nobulele.
Nobulele Sport.
I can Nobulele with a hey guys says that feels like that our superpower is our stamina. We ran an 80-minute team, whereas best everyone in it for 60. And the French definitely ran out of puff, which is the same thing that All in the Game, hey, All in the Game, says that ran out of puff in the last 20 minutes. Still not great under the high ball. Center pairing wasn't quite right. Fiku, who started very young, has a lot of miles on his 31-year-old body. Yeah, I didn't see much of him. He's a really good player. We've seen him at his best, and very well respected. You saw they had a long chat, him and Kolisi, at the end of that match. Another one we're going to talk about, having to sit out the bulk of his 100th test, but it was for good reason. But yeah, let me first address this before we move on. Some French running out of puff. And we heard Sia on the sidelines. I don't know if you saw that shot where he stood up and he was, they're getting tired. Getting tired.
It's in my report on the match. I think he put it a bit sterner than that. That they were tired.
It was funny.
No, it was for me. It was quite an interesting thing. I mean that it's always amazing how like both sides can pick almost exactly the same, and the results can be so different. The French also went 6-2 split on the bench,
Yeah.
which is, the Boks obviously had a flexibility by picking Andre Esterhuizen at sort of center slash flank. So that was fine. In that sense, that was fine in that sense. But they had what's his name? I think Jegu, who apparently has
Yes.
also turned up at center. So the two benches mirrored themselves, but the impact of the two benches was totally different. At some level, it was like watching us against Australia, where we sort of ran ourselves off our own feet. And that was, I mean, I remember sort of like one of the things I said in my report was that, in amongst all the talk about revenge, the French kind of like forgot the saying that, revenge is a dish best served cold, not
Right.
not sort of like emotionally like they were trying to. I was watching the approach of the two teams. The Boks were quite, even though they were under the cosh, they were quite measured. If they had a penalty goal to take, they took it. The French were playing like they had a bonus point to catch. Every time going for the corners. Maybe sometimes it's almost like it almost like reflects your fear, your lack of trust of what are you going to do when these guys finally come back at you. So you're trying to sort of bury them under a mountain of points so that they're not going to be able to come back at you. And they most definitely, I mean, we've been before in the build up to the game, we were talking at length about how the whole Bok thing, the whole sort of the whole game would be centered on these guys, coming at the Boks. They did come at the Boks, but what happened was, when the time came, you were playing against a team that had been in the rugby championship and won it. A very difficult rugby championship where they had to sort of make similar solutions to problems, because remember, at one stage that competition was you win this game but you definitely don't win the next one, until the Boks
Yeah.
started bucking that trend. So we'd been talking about, will the French be undercooked and will the Boks be battle hardened or even sort of battle weary? There was your answer in the game, in how the game unfolded. In the end, the Boks were battle hardened, and although the French were really, really, really good in terms of their physicality, their intensity and their tempo, they ran out simply because they just hadn't played in a match of similar sort of of similar sort of difficulty. And when Noblele says, the Box's superpower is a sort of being an 80-minute team, you have to take it back to June, when when Rassie sort of like watched the Boks not do particularly well against Italy and Georgia, and then deciding, what, these guys need an extra week of sort of training and conditioning, in Johannesburg. And they did that for like, for that. So I think they trained for 3 weeks before the rugby championship. And this is what the sort of rewards
Yeah.
of approach look like. And so much of yesterday was about, I mean, we're going to talk about it a bit later, because I think I've spoken long enough, anyway. A lot of yesterday was about how much Rassie had seen it coming, which is insane. How do you see
Yeah.
so many of
Yeah.
those things coming?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm absolutely fascinated by how Andre worked out, given the situation that we were in. Morning says Elijah, blood pressure tablet subscription on weekly repeat during the autumn internationals. What I really love, he says, about this team is chasing lost causes, simply sensational. And yeah, I have to agree with that because I think it was what was it? Probably 11 o'clock last night. There was a collective sigh of frustration, I think, by South African fans as that red card took place, as it happened. And yeah, I think weirdly, Sim, when the red card occurred, I don't feel like I panicked as much as I would have in the past. It kind of felt like, Rassie's going to do something. The team is going to adapt in some way. They're going to be looking for a solution. Like you said earlier, they seem to be a team that's built around solutions. Not only just here's our game plan and we present it, but very much about how do we go about things. I mean, don't forget someone like Boan Venter who played very little rugby last night, and that was part of the solution. And I thought he started very well, but Rassie obviously saw something that the French wouldn't have predicted. But when Lord de Jager picked up that red, how did you feel? I mean, yes, pressure. Yes, we could have just let the game slip. But there was also definitely a sense of these guys know what to do. I looked around immediately. They made the changes. Sia came off. Peter Steff came to take over the captaincy. And I thought, actually, we've still got enough locks on the field. Our tight five will still be able to operate. We've got a full scrum and can still compete, and we did. And we also have a full back line if we are called upon to attack. Just felt like, okay, this is going to be a mountain to overcome. But if there's one team that can, it's the Boks.
Yeah, you say that now. Maybe that's me saying I probably didn't quite feel as comfortable as you did that they knew what they were doing. Or they would know what to do for the rest. I was just worried that with 15 men, the Boks had battled to contain the French, and we're behind, and so logic goes, well, if you lose one man, a forward, a lock, the task just got more ridiculous, and again, if you want to sort of talk about history repeating itself between these two teams, you want to think back. You just mentioned Peter Steff. You want to think back to 2022 in Marseille, where I think the French won by about 4 points. Very narrow, very closely contested game. I think there was one or two calls that we were complaining about that Wayne Barnes didn't catch or didn't pull through. But that game again, the Boks played with one man short for 68 minutes because Peter Steff was red carded for a dangerous clean out on Dante. And so, it was weird again how, that came to repeat itself. But to speak to your point, maybe you're getting better chats out of the Boks than I am. Sia in his sort of immediate press conference says, yeah, you know what? Coach prepped us for that eventuality, which, when you think about it, makes absolute sense. You're going into a stadium where the fans will start cheering the ref as early as they possibly can, which is like within 5 minutes. Like, as a ref, you can't possibly have had such a shocker that you're getting cheered within the first 5 minutes. But the French do that, but obviously they do it as the psychology of getting on top of you to make sure that you make the right calls for them. And with respect to Angus Gardner, maybe the feeling was that he was a guy you could get on top of, as opposed to, say, Ben O'Keefe in the 2023 quarterfinal. And so it goes to follow then that if you've got that sort of psychology on the run already, one of the logical next steps is that somebody's bound to get a card, and that card is bound to be a decisive one. And so that was that sort of almost played itself out. Well, that basically played itself out with with Lourdes sending off for that hit on on Tomás Ramos. And you know what? Yes, we can talk about the mitigating circumstances of how low Ramos was, and but you know what sort of killed him was the fact that his arm was tucked instead of looking like someone who's making a normal tackle. And so at some level I can understand it, but to go back to the psychology of what I'm talking about, the psychology of the home crowd getting on top of the ref. Louis Biel's yellow card. Yes, it was a yellow card, but it was also penalty try all day long.
Yeah.
But that call wasn't made. I mean, they made
Yes.
the yellow card call
Yes.
because it was obvious. There's nothing else
It
you
was,
can do.
it was a
But
2-on-1.
the other sort of decisive call to make, because remember, Gardner's words in Lourdes' incident was he actually refereed intent, which I found to be a bit problematic. You can't say he intentionally, it was dangerous and it was intentional. Yes, it was dangerous, but I'm not sure about intentional. So having sort of made that leap with the Lourdes decision, I found it interesting that when it became crystal clear that, I mean, if Jesse catches that ball, he is scoring. Forget the fact that it's a 2-on-1 between him and Cheslin Colby, and then and Ramos sort of like in the middle of the player to draw. And I yeah, so I mean, I think what I'm still praising here is for Rassie sort of foreseeing that. And then, I mean, we probably, the next step, because again, I've spoken too long, the next step we then should talk about the steps they took to actually then deal with the problem, because I thought that was the actual genius.
Yeah, I have to agree 100%. It was just absolutely superb how it worked out. And takes me back to the conversation we had with Gary Gold a couple of months ago when it comes to red cards and intent. I still feel like a red card should not be given unless there is malicious intent to affect the game or injure someone. I just still feel that way. I'm not saying that the 10-minute red card shouldn't exist at all. I think maybe that's where it comes more into play. But yeah, I suppose we'd be talking more about it had it led to a direct Springbok loss. But I do feel that in the balance of things, had the roles been reversed, had it been a French player going into a South African player, we would have said red card. So I'm not too upset by the call itself. Thanks for the comments, guys and girls. Keep them coming. Love to hear from you. Johan Potgieter says the Boks rope-a-dope tactic worked excellently. It really did.
Hey, that was my word in my report.
They really did a bit of a rope-a-dope. Oh, really? No, but
Yeah,
they
that was
did.
my
They
word in my
waited.
report.
They
So I
did their
hundred
time. They
percent
tied.
agree with you.
They let the French tie themselves out. Yeah, no, it was really amazing to see. Elijah saying made the effort to Google a lot of French breakfast items while I rewatch the whole thing again. Enjoy your croissant, merci. Elijah saying the breakfast will go down a treat. Alila Boka, we conquered Twikfontein, went to start Rassie, conquered that too. Onwards to Turin, Wanderer, one of the greatest Boks victories ever. Once again, French fell off in the second half. Boks smashed them. And I have to give the French credit some, because it feels like every time we watch these two teams play, something magical happens. And I could be a typical South African fan and say, yeah, we've won more games than not, but I really think that they lift themselves for each other, and that's great to see. And I love that there's a little bit still of an unknown quantity when it comes to France. You don't quite know what team is going to rock up on the day, and they are world beaters. But I love that. I love that. Every single time there's this air of uncertainty, and it really makes for magical test matches. I'm thinking these last three are right up there in terms of, sure, the impact, the physicality. The one we lost, of course, Peter Steph going off with the red card in Marseille, and then the one at the World Cup, and then this one. Phenomenal when these teams play each other.
Yeah, it's always an occasion. I remember thinking in the build up to the game last week that how much does it really mean? Like there's no World Cup. There's no World Cup at at stake. It's just a rugby match. If you really, want to sort of break it down to those rudimentary sort of calls, it wasn't and it isn't. But this fixture, because in my opinion these are probably the two best teams in the world right now, this fixture keeps delivering. And the little sort of the little sideshow that's beginning to develop between the two teams in terms of themselves, there's a sort of an almost new rivalry that's building. And I think it's building because of how different the two teams are in terms of, it's weird, they're very similar in terms of everything else they do. Genius coach, massively huge players, massively physical, play up tempo, and they just not afraid to try things. The Boks have gone with a 6-2 split. They've gone and have gone with the 7-1 split, which the French have followed. Both of those things. The French these days, I think they don't even play a 5-3 split bench anymore. They've been, they're basically that they've just been at the 6-2 split bench team. But the big thing for me is the
Yeah,
difference.
permanently.
Yeah, I think what gives the contest a bit of an edge is just how different they are. The Boks are very much a team, and the French are very much individuals. So a great example of that would be Mathieu Jalibert during the Six Nations. During the Six Nations, Galtier decided to play Ramos at 10, and Jalibert was in the squad. So he basically didn't honor the call up the next time. He said, "No, I don't want to come. It's cool. You guys can do whatever you want to do. I'm not interested." Can you imagine a Bok player saying that kind of thing? And you go to yesterday for the Boks, Sia gets subbed on his on his 100th, like at halftime. It's a very tough pill to
Yeah.
swallow.
Oh
The
man.
game is more than in the balance.
Yeah.
But what did he do? He got over himself and he spent the rest of the game standing on the touchline, screaming instructions and trying to make sure that the team got over. And I don't think it was one of those situations where it had a lot to do with, oh, I need to win my 100th. It's just the way those guys do things. So I think that's why games between France and South Africa are just becoming so blockbuster. It's because it is a rivalry. It might be new-ish, but it is a rivalry. But what also draws all of us in is just how differently they go about their work.
Well, he did say in the press conference immediately after the match that one of the things that they've spoken about is what they do when they're on the sidelines. So having to help G up their team members is important, and I heard Sia mention that that's something that they actually are intentional about. So even if he was feeling a little bit down, I think the way that they go about it is, listen, it's part of your job now. Your teammates actually do rely on you. They want to see you. They want to hear the calls from the sidelines. They want to hear that encouragement. So I love that they're that granular about it. Mike Spencer, 4922 says, I stopped listening at your 10th, It's a pity, Mike. I'm so
Yeah, I'm
sad.
sorry. Sorry for
We're
pissing you
glad you
off, Mike.
listened, though.
Sorry for pissing you off, Mike. I'll
I
go for I'll
know.
go I'll go
Oh,
for elocution
gosh, I
lessons.
don't know. Life's not, life's not that serious. But anyway, on we go. At Mook 1-1, Mook 11, MUC 11. I think the team drew on the experience in Marseille in 2022. I agree. Goes on to say what's more impressive is that the older guys went off early and the younger guys replicated what the older guys could do. There was that shot of Sia sitting next to Eben Etzebeth, and you kind of realize that, sure, they can do this turning games around and winning without the old guard. And I just thought that the way they managed after they went a man down, Sim, for me was absolutely phenomenal. And Ruan Norkia is fast becoming one of my favorite Springboks. I just think that man he does nothing wrong, I think is the way I'd best describe his play. He just does everything right. And you almost don't see him because he's one of those guys. He's like a mustard, you don't see the endeavor sometimes. But I just think that the change, him coming on to call the lineouts, worked absolutely flawlessly for the Springboks, and he did what he was meant to do.
Yeah, I think he's one of those guys that embodies what the Boks are all about. Because if you remember that video that went viral just after the 2019 World Cup final, where Rassie's giving the speech about you Venchat, if you think this is about you and your mistakes and whatnot, get into as many battles as you possibly can, without fear of reprisal from us, and just keep going. If basically it's almost one of those, if you sort of worked yourself into hell, just keep going. And I think Ruan is one of the few guys that really, really, really embodies that, in that he works so hard that even if he does make a mistake, you forget it, because the next thing he does is going to be a positive impact. And and he just keeps going. He keeps going. He doesn't stop. He just keeps running. He keeps doing his job. And you mentioned that it's like watching Soos Mostert. I find that interesting. One of the big questions I've been asking throughout since 2023 is, geez, how do you replace these guys? How do you replace these generational players? That the Boks have sort of developed over the last, since 2018, and obviously with how much they've won.
Yeah.
One of the things was, well, we're going to need a few sort of like for like replacements in some of the places, because to replace Sos is totally different. It's not quite the same as just another sort of lock coming in. You've also got a guy who can play blindside, and the really attractive thing about both Ruan and Mostert is the work rate. And so you found a like for like replacement for him. You're probably going to look for one for Jasper Wiese, and they thinking about Joano Augustus, who's another like for like player. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff sort of taking place behind the scenes. And like you say, Ruan Nokia is probably the biggest surprise in terms of how he's fared in a green and gold jersey, because not only to us but also to Rassie and his coaches, because I think he made it clear. Rassie made it crystal clear last year when Ruan suddenly had to play, because I think Etzebeth was injured, John Klein and Erges Neyman were injured. He made it crystal clear that this guy was kind of like sixth on our list in terms of the locks that we've got, and he's taken his chance, and he just hasn't looked back since.
Yeah, no, he looks undroppable from that squad at the moment. I like this one. Maziki we ikrosansi. Yes, and they shall be eaten today. Zizokiwa.
As soon as I'm done.
Yeah, croissants will be devoured all day today. Sim Kize also saying that Marx was a beast. Visa carried hard. You just mentioned him. And Reinach was class. Love how he got into Ramos's head. And that was a nice, I thought there was a nice little tussle going on there between 9 and 15. And it seemed to almost spill over. The ref had to call them aside. But he was really fired up, Kobus Reinach. I mean, that try, I think, individual brilliance from him. We saw him with the cross-cover tackle, which wasn't to be because, Peno still managed to get over the whitewash, but he was there, and he was just absolutely at it, and it looked like he was determined to do something, and I'm so glad he got that individual try of his, just to highlight his brilliance. And he knows the French players in the French league, and I think he knows what it takes sometimes to get under their proverbial skins.
No, my favorite thing on Kobus Reinach was, with all that irascibility he'd shown throughout the game, pushing and shoving and just refusing to go away. When he came off, he literally looked like the Hulk because of all that paint that they were collecting off the field all day long. The Boks were kind of like, they're getting blue, and they had some. I think Matt Pierce, the Super Sport commentator, said, you know what? They started the game in white, but they're probably going to finish it in green, because they keep picking up paint on the ground. And Kobus had it on his face. If you looked at him when he got subbed, he just looked like, he basically looked like the Incredible Hulk. And I'm just like, this is very fitting, because he had played like the Incredible Hulk. He had the sort of irascibility of one, and then over and above that,
Yeah.
he was like, over and above that, he was basically just like, just smashing into things, and I just, yeah, it was a nice performance by him, because we kind of needed that counter punching sort of ability in a game in which the Boks were
Mm.
under cosh, by my estimation, for the first 60 minutes.
Yeah, and in the moment in which it came is absolutely, I think, crucial as well for that scoreboard, because let's not forget that Sasha left, I think, 8 points out on the field there. I think it was 2 penalties and a conversion. So,
Yeah.
that scoreline would have looked different. And I wonder how different it would have been going into the second half, and what it would have changed in terms of the Boks approach in the second half, because they had to be more intentional. So it wasn't about picking up the penalties and the 3-pointers. It definitely was about kicking for the corner, even when the opportunity for 3 points presented itself. Super Bowl Joel, Guba Smash. Love that Hulk reference. MUC1 saying, good point on putting the team first. Ezehazen has been with the Boks since 2018, has less than 30 caps, never kicked up a fuss, now has a niche spot in the squad, as he knows the backs and forwards. Is that I wonder for forwards, do they feel like he's been promoted? He's been promoted to join them in the pack, because you know how forwards tend to be about those things. Philip Norton saying, still grappling with how we pulled it off physically. But we were incredible, I think is trying to say there. Amazing how much controlled things in the second half were. In the same breath, feels like not all individual performances, great team effort. And I think, yeah, that speaks to the Springboks. I always look at someone like Cheslin Colby and feel sorry for him, because by Cheslin's standards, he had a quietish day yesterday, and I was still waiting for a moment of magic to come from him. But it came from Kobus Reinach, it came from Grant Williams, it came from Andre Esterhazen. It came with that line-out steal in the second half by, I think it was Ruan again. It was dotted out, littered out across the team, the moments of brilliance. And they were moments of individual brilliance, but really feels like team effort.
Yeah, it's all this is the amazing thing about this current Bok team. They're not short of world class talent. You look at Sasha, you look at Cheslin, like you said, you look at Kurtley Aronson, you look at you look at Damien Willemsen. Those guys are magical players.
Mm.
But their greatest quality is actually not the magic. It's how hard they work for the team and whether they are team men or not. You to make an example, I saw Sasha got the man of the match award. I must admit, I wasn't. That's not what I thought. But I thought the outing
No.
itself was a great sort of apprenticeship moment for him, simply because he was in a situation where he had to understand that in a game of that magnitude, he was going to have to find ways of making himself useful until maybe he did something bigger. So he had to take his penalty shots. And when he missed, 3 kicks, he had to do something else. Tackle, I don't know. He kept on having to do something. I think guys that are brilliant, when they have a game like he did against Argentina, what happens next is they get addicted to wanting to do that every single time. I think Khafi du Toit, I've said this before. Khafi du Toit said, had one of these games where he scored
Yeah.
every single conceivable way, a drop kick from over 50 meters away, penalties, conversions, try, insane game. And he then kept looking for that game every single time. Sometimes all you got to do is pass to the next
Mm.
guy.
Mm.
Sometimes, lie in wait and basically hit the line as a fullback, not hit the line as a fly off that you started as, and score the fourth try. So that's what I like about the Boks, and the fact that it doesn't matter how sort of mega some of the talents are, the real talent of the Bok team is teamwork and hard work.
Okay, let me go back to the messages there because there are a lot of them coming through, and do keep them coming in. There's one that I clearly missed by David McClellan, which I'm trying to find. Okay,
Yeah,
David,
you
let
gotta
me
go
try
back.
and find it. I'm going
You gotta go
all the
back. I don't want him
way.
to find you.
I missed. I don't know. I don't know what it is. Okay, you can just, I don't know if you can retype it for me, but he says, "X, wenzani baba? Why can't you read my message? Even just the first part. You can swap. What? Peter, is it Peter?" Something for snort clap. I don't know. I missed the snort clap one. Please just copy and paste it again so I can check it out at the bottom here, Dave. I'm not gonna miss it on purpose. And Nobubele, thank you very much for that. Saying my name is pronounced Nobubele. Okay, we got it. And talking about Sasha, Narrow Road, Sim, I think makes the point that you were alluding to. How did Sasha get man of the match? Is this maybe a marketing ploy by World Rugby to find a new face for rugby? I hope that's not the case. Narrow Road. I didn't think he was man of the match. I don't think he played badly. I loved his try and a way to come back into it and, like you say, prove valuable in that team setup. And I think he did a couple of things, but it felt to me like he was trying to find his kicking range. A lot of those up and unders just maybe a little too shy, maybe a little bit too long. And he was sort of tussling with that, I felt, quite a bit over the course of the game. Wasn't bad. He was typically physical. There was a half break there as well. And who knows what it could have led to. Sasha was being Sasha, but I don't know if he was man of the match.
First things first, just my apologies to Nobubele. I mean, that's geez, for the two of us. That should be a simple name to get right.
Yeah, no, let's
Sorry
not
to get
tell
that
our
wrong.
parents.
Sorry to get that wrong. That was just stupid. Um, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put it down to a conspiracy. That like a World Rugby conspiracy. And frankly, we've got a lot of those going in South Africa at the moment. Think Jan Hendrik Wessels. Uh, so, but I just
Yeah,
think it's one of those situations
you're right.
where somebody looks at the final score line and it's 32 points, and Sasha didn't have his best game. Maybe that in its own actually makes a point about Sasha. He didn't have what you would call his best game, but he still scored 17 of the points. So you know what? Even on his bad day,
Yeah.
he's great type vibes. But I'm more than willing to let that slide. Simply because I don't know how many matches we've watched on Supersport, URC, or whatever else, and where we've all kind of been like, hang on, wait, how did they come up with him as the man of the match? Remember, with us, I think it comes from the Supersport commentators. And so what I'm thinking is there is a mild obsession in the overseas media, European media at the moment with Sasha. So I mean, I don't think there's one interview that goes past without someone saying, Rassie, about Sasha, like he'll be answering about, I don't know, Sia, and it's just like, yeah, so Sasha, it's like nice segue into Sasha, and you're like, no, he wasn't talking about him. So I think it's part of that. I think it's part of that obsession with Sasha that he got the man of the match. But yeah, whoever says Malcolm Marx was man of the match, for me, probably had it about right, simply because of the time during which it was done. It was when
Mm,
things were really hard, when the Boks, couldn't get out of their own half. So you kind of needed guys to sort of show the grit, and he was probably the leader in that. And by the way, I mean, there were quite a few of those guys we've already spoken about. Kobus Reiner, who also, worked his socks off to stem the tide.
yeah,
Yet Jesse Creel's defense, I thought, was insane. He at one stage he had a prop come at him
it was
and he
immense.
didn't allow him over the advantage line. And then he had one of those big loose forwards, I can't remember which one. Again, he didn't allow him, and then he had to turn and track someone. It might have been Fiku, and he did that. So it's one of those games. You look at Jesse Creel, and people always sort of complain because he doesn't have the magic of a Lucanio arm. But in a game like that, people don't really see him. But I tell you what, his teammates are probably sitting there and going, "Geez, well done," because I thought defensively he was the guy that led us.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. And also a shout out to Damien de Allender as well, who I thought had a very good game until he had to come off to make way for Andre Esterhazy as well. Because I thought that, his carries always with intent. And maybe, that's what Rassie would have wanted for this game. If you look at the way that the French flooded the breakdown, the counter rucks, and they were, I thought, quite successful at it. And in fact, the two times we managed to counter their counter. They got back on top as well. So well done, the French, for trying to employ what the All Blacks, I thought, did very well in that first test in Eden Park. And I wonder if it comes from that. All in the game saying, at his best, Ramos' goal kicking is crucial for France. But is it Burros at fullback who attacks well and better under the high ball should be explored by France? Yeah, they didn't really do particularly well under the high ball. And Sim, we spoke about that fast start. One of the things that happened right in the beginning was that up and under, which they contested incredibly well. And I thought, this could be a long day in the office, at the office for, our back three. But it proved to be, I suppose, a bit of a flash in the pan. The French kicking game, I don't know if it was as effective as they would have wanted it to be. The other thing, while I'm talking about the kicking game, is the meters that they made. I think they had so much possession, but still had less than 100 or more than 100 meters less carry than the Boks, which will be very frustrating because that means you're just getting absolutely no penetration. And maybe it's that defense, and you mentioned Jesse being crucial to it.
Well, the first thing is that they obviously they work under the high ball. It's not a strength. It hasn't been for a very long time. It's probably something they need to work on. And the really cool thing about it, though, is that it is something you can work on. If you take it, if you go back to 2018, we weren't a very good team under that. We were not a very good team under the high ball. Until guys like Zwandile Stick sort of added it to his portfolio. Remember, he had that strange portfolio of off the ball work, which is basically work rate, having taken it from the blitz box. But it's something you can work on. So there's no it's something you can work on. So you shouldn't, they should just keep working on it until they get it right. That's the first thing. But the second part, you're right about those carry meters. They obviously didn't make a lot of meters post contact because they were being met in the collisions. It's always a double-edged sword when you decide to take the Boks on physically, because it's like that whole Bane thing in Batman, where what does he say? I think I see you've adopted the dark as an ally. Well, I was born in it. The Boks were born in the Boks were born in copper stump. So don't come with that as a tactic. It does not always work. Every now and again it does, because eventually somebody will best you physically. That's just the nature of the beast. But it doesn't happen often for a reason. It's because the Boks literally were raised on copper stump. So don't do that as a tactic. It would be my advice.
Yeah.
We still have.
I mean, you mentioned Bane. You mentioned Bane, and I can never get the image of Dwayne Vermeulen out of my mind when you mentioned him. I don't know why. And they showed quite a lot of him on the big screen yesterday as well. I suppose the French have a soft spot for him.
Yeah, I was a busy man. You talk about Boan Fenta being yanked off after 30 minutes and a scrum penalty. Like, I'd be pissed if I got a scrum penalty. Right. Sure, I'm never gonna get a scrum penalty. Look at this. But if I had gotten one and then I got yanked off the park, half an hour into it, I would have been pissed. And so I saw him do a little, damage control there. Like, listen, this is probably what it's for, and this is the thinking of the coaches. I understand Rassie had to do a similar thing with Sia, but in the dressing room. Because Sia says in the press conference that Rassie was quite cut up about having to tell him that, sorry, dude, you're not actually going back in. Like, sorry, bro, but you're not going back in. We're gonna get 6 to pass in, and then the rest was history. I was, the genius of, for me, I've been wanting to talk about Rassie's genius. We all had this big question mark during the week. Quagga Smith is the bomb squad. Yeah, like everything he does, he's got the work rate, he's got the punchiness, he scores the tries, he does, he contests. And in the game against the French in 2023, he got the penalty over Dupont that led to Ibn Etebeth's try, which was obviously the decisive try as far as the match was concerned. And then he got the ruck steal, the penalty just inside his half that Andre Pollard would kick over in that famous Bongi saying to him for South Africa moment, where he would kick it over to make the score 29-28. So what I'm saying is Kwagga is the bomb squad, and these guys somehow decided, no, we're not going to play him, and him hurting his hand during the week kind of like helped them, sort of make up their minds, apparently because he was nursing an injured hand going into Monday, but he trained very well for the rest of the week. But they stuck to their guns and they went with under 8 days. And as it turned out, that was a stroke of genius because they again needed, forget that obviously Ruan Nokia had to come on because he was now suddenly the guy who needed to make the line out calls, in the field. Forget that. Andre Estes coming on suddenly meant we were going to do that thing that we did against Italy when Jasper Wiese got himself red carded, which was in the box scrums. He would scrum at flank, and then when the Boks were defending, he would defend at center. Yeah. And that's what he had to do. And again, if Rassie hadn't had an inkling that there might be a red card in a game of this intensity and just kind of like physicality and desperate desire, if he hadn't thought ahead that far, we probably would have been caught a little bit short in terms of who to bring on once Luid Diaga was sent off. You have to praise the level of genius and foresight that goes into that. I mean, these guys, they must look at a game in a way that's more than 360 because yesterday there was nothing the Bok coaches didn't appear to have thought of, and that for me was probably what I enjoyed the most about the game.
Yeah, and we get through some of these comments, and I love them. But we've been on for almost an hour, and it feels like there's so much to this game we haven't even touched on. What you say about the Bok coaches and their prep, there was a moment in the first half, it was pre the red card, where Tony Brown did a little elbow thing to Rassie. I don't know if you saw that, and they had like a little bit of a laugh, and it felt to me in the moment like they had identified something. We can speculate what that something is. Personally, I think they saw that the French maul defense was nowhere for yesterday, but it could be anything that they identified. But there was a moment there, they were trailing. I think Sash had already missed one of the penalties. A lot of teams would have been down and thinking, oh gosh, how do we prepare? This is going to be so tough. They started so well, the French. But that's not what I picked up in that coach's box. And that to me was an interesting little moment and just spoke volumes about, I'm sure it got very tense for them at some stage, especially after the red card. But there was just this absolute confidence, and that must flow down to the field, to the players on it. Okay, I said we're going to go through the comments. There's a lot of them. Super Bowl Joe talking about the comments. I think this was in reference to Sasha Feinberg Ngomezulu always being mentioned, saying, I feel sorry for Rassie having to field all of these questions every press conference, but he handles them very diplomatically. He does. And I also thought that Sasha handled his man of the match little post-match interview very well as well, giving a lot of credit to Sia and the team, and I think being intentional about that. There was one that I shouldn't have missed it. David, you back. Dave says, then we gave them one running roundhouse perpendicular POS club.
PK.
I'm not going to translate. Thank you very much. A PK. A PK, yeah. Dave also says, eggs and simple put, it's lacquer to be lacquer when you lacquer, which, so this is weird, Sim. It means I've met Dave, because I remember that very, very well. I actually used it on television a couple of years ago.
Yeah, worry
so
about the
thanks,
place
Dave, and it's good to see you. Ah, man, like the Boks, I go to some dark places. Let's not get into too much detail. Narrow Road saying it's good to see how Rassie is honoring the veterans with the biggest games. First one was to try and break New Zealand home game record, and now the one against France, rewarding them for the two recent World Cups. Yeah, it certainly is. I think if you were to ask Rassie, and jump in here, Sim, how much they think about reward for individual players, he'd probably say it's not important at all. He'd probably say it's not about Sia's 100th. He'd probably say, it's more about the team than the individual. But surely at some stage, you must concede that guys like Sia, like Eben, as we saw them sitting side by side, they've done so much and been part of this turnaround because, pre-2018, it's almost like a history that we don't really want to delve too much into the depths of, besides the two World Cups. But yeah, I think if you were to ask him, he'd probably say, not important.
Yeah, the older players is quite an interesting thing because we as South Africans are in that sort of run in the last 2 years, building up into, it's not even 2 years, it's probably about 18 months after this tour is finished, building up into the World Cup. And so a lot of the questions we're asking tend to be, centered on, how many of them shouldn't go to Australia in 2027. But so it is a double-edged sword to go, I've got a big game to play, and therefore I'm going to pick these guys, the older guys to play because, well, they've been there, done that. 2 World Cups, 3 rugby championships, and a British and Irish Lions series win. So obviously these guys have been there and done that. It is a double-edged sword because, well, we used the same players in Auckland because it was such an important game, and we didn't win. And it was the younger sort of new players who brought us back into the rugby championship conversation to the point where we could successfully defend it. I think the big thing with the Boks always comes down to, like you say, the collective. It's always about, what are you doing for the team. So for me, that performance yesterday, it was less about, like you said, it was less about Sia's 100th than it was about a team being true to itself. But by the same token, in my opinion, you probably don't win yesterday's game without those older players. And, if you look at the French team, that's a very talented team, which is going to hurt a lot of teams in the Six Nations. You can take it as read. Watch the Six Nations next year.
Yeah,
People will be hurt by this French side.
yeah.
But what they lacked, apart from obviously, the physical readiness or the match fitness that deserted them towards the end of that game, was just the nous of, how do we turn this dominance into points, whereas the Boks were sitting there going, okay, they're dominating us in so many areas, but can we defend them all better here? Can we use our maul to sort of transfer a little bit of the pressure? Can we defend better? Can someone, can we chip at poles to get some kind of foothold in this game and to kind of like be within a watchful brief's worth of points away from them. And that all comes from guys who know what to do in a situation like that. And if we'd played the younger players, I'm not 100% sure we would have been able to do that yesterday.
Okay, wrapping up the comments, Super Bowl Joel. Personal question for you two. Any advice on getting into sports journalism, presenting in South Africa based on personal experiences? A lot of advice. Tell you what, Super Bowl Joel, why don't you hit me up on Instagram? Just send me a DM. We can take this conversation offline. But yeah, I think the most important thing is do it. Just start. And it's very, very hard to. But I don't know if you actually want to. Do you really want to?
My answer is don't go into writing. You are not loaded. You're not rich. Your richness will only come from enjoying the games and
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
giving accreditation to the game. So don't do the writing route. I'll tell you what, I finished writing that match last night at about 4 a.m. this morning.
Yeah.
So no, I didn't have a drink like everybody else last night. So yeah, listen, if you still want it, by all means, you carry on. But
Yeah,
I think maybe the pretty boy presenters like Xola and them, yeah, no, no, that might
maybe
be
when I
the way to
was
go.
maybe when I was younger,
Don't
maybe
do
when
the
I was
right
younger.
thing. Don't do the writing thing.
That is the one thing with journals that I only recognized the first time I sat in a sort of a press conference or in the media suite, and who knows, this would have been early 2000s. That you can't be a fan, you can't celebrate, you can't be there shouting for your team, and journals are very, very, should I say, judgy, Sim, of anybody who goes to the Media Tribune and has an opinion expressed emotionally. So you just be very, very, very mindful of that. But I think you can start. I mean, online is fantastic because you really can just start. But yeah, drop me a message, DAB on maybe Instagram or Facebook, and we can definitely chat about it. Rhoda Dutoy, loving the discussion. Thank you very much, Rhoda, saying agreed with about all of it. And hey, we're not here for just agreements. If you do have disagreements, we love it. We love having the chat and looking at rugby a little bit more critically than just emotionally. It'll always come into it. All in the game, Ireland will have around 21 players at 30 years old at the 27 World Cup, including 12 of them aged 34 to 37. This could be an issue for them. Well, I think if you can manage those older players like the Springboks are, then maybe it is a non-issue. There was another all in the game. Any thoughts about any of the other matches? It's a very big question. And Dave, I see that last one, but maybe very, very quickly, some talking about the other matches just very briefly, because I know you would have been focused on getting this article out for today, so you would have been working. But Australia going down to Italy, they'll be very disappointed. This is a team that beat the Springboks at Ellis Park. I don't know what's going down there, but it just looks like they're not the same team from just a couple of weeks ago, really. I mean, was it like, what, a month ago? A month and a half ago?
Yeah, yeah, I think they've just kind of also they're doing things a little arse about face the Aussies at the moment. Joe Schmidt finally gets them playing the way he would like to in his second year, and what I know he asked to leave, but what do they do? They change leadership because I think Les Kiss is gonna take over as head coach next year. That's like sometimes you do what you have to do to make sure that when you've got the right guy at this level, you stick with the right guy. So I think maybe the performance of the team is starting to fall in between those cracks of, yes, you've got Joe, but it's not really here anymore. Les Kiss, I think the Les Kiss was supposed to travel with them to South Africa for the rugby championship. So
Right.
I suspect he may have traveled, to the end of year tour with them. And if he has, you kind of sort of muddying the waters. You know what the Boks they know. Yes, Tony Brown is an important cog. So is Don. So is this guy. So is that guy. But everybody knows who to look at when the Brown stuff hits a fan, and that's Rassie. And I think the Aussies have kind of like muddied that chain of sort of that chain of command a little bit with how they're going on with their coaching situation behind the scenes. I think they've also got Carter Gordon back,
Yeah.
which again, that's another. It's it's probably a good move in the long run, but it's right here, right now. It's a little disruptive. But what it does show, though, is that we need to be careful against Italy. Remember what they did
Exactly.
at Loftus,
Yeah.
and yeah, we will change, make a lot of changes in our team to rest these guys that obviously went to war yesterday. So as a result, we do need to actually be careful in that. As much as we make changes, we're still cautious enough to understand that. Hang on, wait. These guys could be dangerous. I must tell you a
Yeah.
funny story about the Italian coach, Gonzalo Quesada, came down to South Africa after Italy had been here because he's big mates with John Dobson and Davi's name and Davi in particular at
Right.
the Stormers. So they'd visited him in Port Elizabeth, in Gqeberha.
Yeah.
They'd visited him just to see how the Italian team go about their stuff when they were here to play the Boks. And then obviously the Italians didn't score. I think they lost 48-0 or whatever it was. And the first thing when they picked them up at the airport in Cape Town, Casado says to them, I see you guys bloody told Rassie and them what we were doing.
You know how many foreign coaches I've seen in PE in the Bay? It's fun. It's amazing. I've seen a couple of former All Blacks coaches just going in for a little visit, and I'm talking in the off season as well. There's a lot of stuff happening at Rebecca, which is always fascinating to me. David, before you, we still the other matches. Some jeepers, the time is going, but I think we're very wary of the Azuri because the Springboks have them next 26-19. That one finished. England beat Fiji 38-18, and I feel for the Fijians. They're going to face an angry French side next week. Ireland, they beat Japan 41-10, and I wonder if they were trying to not maybe match the Springboks victory margin against the Japanese. I don't think it matters that much how much they beat them. I think it was one-way traffic. And then New Zealand against Scotland. I thought the Scots put up an incredible fight. Damien McKenzie gave them the win right at the end. I think he scored a try. There was a penalty as well. He sort of single-handedly did it for the Kiwis, but the Scots got so close to their first win over the All Blacks since goodness knows when. I read it somewhere. They've never beaten them. There was a draw, I think, was it in the 60s or something?
Beaten them, no. And the thing about that, the important thing about that game is that the Scots went from 17-0 down at halftime to being in a position where they could win the game. Was it Carter that got himself sin binned for tripping? And during that time, they basically made up they made up the deficit. And by the time he came back, that's an expensive sin bin. By the time he came back, the scores were level, and suddenly there was the Scots were in the ascendancy. So it's a pity, but the All Blacks and the Springboks don't get their respect, but they've got just that little bit of more capacity from the perspective of can they still get a win out of a situation they shouldn't. And that was a great example of that. Fiji a little unfortunate because they gave it to England.
To the English.
So I like what's going on with Fiji, but that's a story for another day.
Yeah, no, I do as well. I think they're also managing to sustain a lot of their success or their performances, which I think marks something very exciting for the future. We're going to wrap it up there. Muhammad Williams says, even if you win the Boks, even if you beat the Boks, you've been in a war, you will surely be severely damaged when playing the next match.
I agree with that. It's like the old days in tennis. If you were trying to win a Grand Slam and you had to get past Rafa Nadal, Djokovic, or Federer, or all three of them, by the time you get to the game you need to win, you can't win it because you've been in this in the war with this guy. With these guys, with all three of them. So it is a bit like that playing the Boks, and you traumatic stress lasts a bit longer.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to wrap up the match by I hate doing this because I'm not an Orlando Pirates supporter at all, but this is for Paul. Yeah. He wanted me to do that because he hasn't watched the game. He hasn't been listening to this entire conversation. He doesn't know what went down.
Guys, I think.
Oh, there he is. And I could be a real doers and just
don't
leave
say anything.
But I'm not going to do that.
Fellas, do you know how hard the last 6 hours has been?
I won't do that to you, Paul. But we've had a great chat. I hope you get to watch the show as well. Thanks, everyone, for joining in and love the comments. Do keep them coming. We'll be back again next week to lead up to the Boks versus the Azuri. And then, of course, next Saturday will be a wonderful opportunity to wrap it all up. So thanks. Give us a like, a share, and a subscribe. Cheers, Sim. Always good to see you. Cheers, Paul.
Cheers, guys.
Enjoy the rugby, and cheers, everyone.
It's queued up and ready to go. Cheers, everybody.
Welcome back to That Rugby Union Show. Well, what a week it's been.
He's playing like a man possessed.
And so much to talk about. It's not this Rugby Union Show. It's That Rugby Union Show.